everyone. Happy Thursday. It's so nice to see all our friends and neighbors and familiar faces and new faces. Please do share your video. We like to see you. It gets a little lonely here in the SIP. It's nice to see everybody on a Thursday night. It has been another gorgeous day here in the Napa Valley. You can see the sun starting to set there with the webcam. We've had really warm weather, and it's definitely warm winter days and nights these days here. But we're expecting some rain and the cold weather to return soon. Little bit of housekeeping. I hope everyone has poured themselves a glass of wine, because that is the most important thing here today. And do click on the participant button so you can make sure you're muted, and use the little blue hand to raise your hand. If you want to ask some questions, we'll unmute you. And also the chat button, because we do post questions and comments that come off Instagram Live and Facebook Live there, as well as we have the majority of the people participating that way where we can't see them. We like being able to see you and participating this way. So nice to have everybody, and thanks for joining us for the new series and the Warm Winter Night series. So we're gonna kick off with some fun things tonight. We added a few extra guests. We've got Kendra Bruno joining us from the City of Napa. She's a waste prevention specialist, and we thought it was kind of a nice follow-up to Napa Green last week to have her come and give us some tips at home for composting as we get ready for our garden this spring. We've got our fantastic estate horticulturalist Bri Hoover is joining us again, and we're going to have her help us get ready for those spring gardens later on. So great to have Bri back with us. She'll be helping you prep with some indoor growing for a little while. And of course, our amazing Brooke Shank, our winemaker, and the fantastic Chef Tod Kawachi. I know we're all fans of Chef Tod. He's making the SIP a lot better for all of us, as is Brooke. So and without further ado, we've got, first off, Michael Garcia, our manager of viticulture, out at the ranch. He's out at the ranch today. And last week he showed us some cordon pruning. And this week we're going to look at cane pruning and some little differences there in the buds and the details. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Michael Garcia, to tell us a little bit about cane pruning and how you're making these important decisions in the vineyard, because frankly, pruning is one of the most important and technical decisions that you don't always think about how hard it is to make those decisions quickly and how important it is for our crop for the season. So, Michael?
Definitely. And like you said, Emma, cane pruning is a very important decision. We have a bud right in front of us. So while we looked at these bud dissections last week, I think the information we get from them is more usable in terms of cane pruning, which we'll see in just a minute here. So on the screen here is a bud. Inside of each of these buds will become a shoot for the current growing season. So this is what a cane prune vine looks like when it's complete. And one of the major benefits of cane pruning is you can count the number of buds that you leave versus cordon pruning, where you're kind of stuck. And so in this picture right here, we can see a bud dissected in half. All the swirly parts around are the leaves that will come on a shoot in this upcoming growing season. And right in the middle, a little bit difficult to see, but easier on this one, are the inflorescence primordia, the cluster primordia, and that will become the 2, or in some cases 3 clusters of grapes that we'll have on our vine this year. So we can look at these dissections, look at the health of the buds, look at how many clusters were formed, how many are healthy, and then what I'm doing right here is counting the number of buds, so we can add or remove on this cane the number of buds we want to get the optimal yield for block and to fit into our quality standards.
Yeah, it's a lot of manual work, and it's a lot of science, and it's a lot of thought process and experience that goes into that decision that you're making there, Michael.
Yeah, and it just depends on the block and down to the vine per block even. Each vine is different, and we have to make those decisions in each vine.
Yeah.
So on this video right here, we're doing cane pruning, and one of the major differences I see in cane pruning versus spur pruning that we saw last week is you make a lot fewer cuts, but you're making more decisions. So it's fewer cuts and more decisions. As you can see, when I'm pruning this vine, the outside's coming off, and the decisions of cane selection and spur selection are very important, but we're only making about 4 or 5 cuts to get that vine pruned. And those 2 canes that are upright, that's what we'll leave for the growing season this year, and that's what will have the majority of the crop on it. And the 2 spurs, as you can see below, are for future positions. They'll also have crop on it. Here's another video of that concept explained. But those are to keep the head below the wire, to keep the head from spreading too wide at once, and to keep our fruit in a position that we want.
So with this, upcoming rain that we've got coming on, I know you guys are going to have to stop pruning because of disease pressure that we get with the rain. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do to protect the vine from that disease and spores and so forth?
Yeah, so in terms of cane pruning, we're leaving fewer wounds. That comes along with making fewer cuts. And that's optimal because an open wound is a site where fungal spores can get in, and trunk diseases. Eutypa is a common one, can infect the vine and really affect the long-term health and the longevity of these vines in the field. And so with the rain coming, the rain will splash fungal spores into the open wounds. So we'll stop pruning altogether. We do spray kind of a preventative paint just as a block to keep the spores from going in. But when it's raining, we'll stop pruning altogether and shift our focus to erosion control and to making sure our drainage system on the hills is functioning properly.
Yeah, it's quite a sudden shift from this wonderful, 70+ degree weather to cold, chilly rain and slogging around making sure the drainage is working. But equally important task to make sure we don't have runoff into the river. And so I noticed that those canes were up pretty high with the wires. So what's your next step after that, after you cut the canes?
Yeah, so the canes are sticking straight up like you said, and the next thing we'll do is to just tie them down, and we've got a video here of our guys. This is this morning in some Sauvignon Blanc tying the canes down, and this is something that in the past was done by hand, but we have these tie gun machines now, and it's really increased the efficiency, and they come with a biodegradable tape, so you can see the reel on the belt there spinning, and that's got a biodegradable tape that ties the canes down and gets things all set for the year.
Yeah, that is so much faster than doing it by hand, and it's certainly kind of really tough on your hands to be doing it by hand. So you got to love technology when it helps you out in that regard, that's for sure. Well, looking really good, and nice to see that cover crop starting to grow, and hoping we're going to see some great growth on that as we head into this rainy season. Let's chat with Brooke. Brooke, you were out in the vineyard here at the winery just a little earlier today, because it's dark now. So why don't you tell us what's going on in Rutherford?
Sure. So the 2017 Rutherford Cabernet Franc that we have tonight, it's all 100% grown on our Rutherford property. And this actually is our Merlot parcel 31 that we've seen in past virtual tasting series. And we have 11% of this Merlot in the Cabernet Franc wine that we're drinking. So we thought it'd be pertinent to look at this block. And, we've been following this block for about 10 months now. We've almost seen a full cycle of the vineyard throughout the year, but you can see that there is some cover crop there that's coming up. And as Emma said, we're going to get some rain, so we're hoping that'll drive that cover crop up, but the cover crop is helping to give nutrients to the soil, to these vines. And this block is cordon pruned. So you can see it's different than the cane pruning of what Michael Garcia was just showing us. And obviously it hasn't been pruned yet. So that will happen in the next few weeks. It was quite chilly out there this morning, about 35 degrees when I got here, and then it warmed up to mid 60s. So another gorgeous day in the Napa Valley, and looking forward for the rain for sure.
Yeah, and so the Cabernet Franc is a little further towards the back of the winery, not from the front section, and that is all cane pruned, right?
Yeah, it is. We actually have 3 blocks of Cabernet Franc, and they are all different clones of Cabernet Franc. So, and we'll find out later kind of what we do with those once we pick them. But yeah.
Yeah, well, it's going to be lots of fun. So moving from the vineyard over to what we can do at home to be a little greener this week. You know, we always like to talk a little bit about Napa Green, and I'm super excited to have Kendra Bruno here with us today because it's really amazing how much waste we all generate. We started home composting over 20 years ago, and we found that our trash bag each week was like this big, you know, and it didn't really even need to go out because so much of our waste can be composted in a really efficient manner and be kind of fun and great for our gardens in the spring. So Kendra is going to talk to us a little bit about the programs we have here in Napa and hopefully some things you can do at home.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. It's a pleasure to be here. And you're right. When you recycle and compost correctly, about 90% is going to recycling and composting, and you only have about 10% left for your trash. And it shouldn't smell because you have nothing decomposing in there. And talking about decomposing, we're going to look at compost and talk about compost. Here, we can't turn water into wine, but we can turn food waste into soil that makes wine. And though composting feels new to a lot of people, it actually is really old, 12,000 years old to be exact, starting in Scotland, they think, and they have huge compost piles. Here in the city of Napa, we are super fortunate. Curbside, what we can put into our brown or green carts, and that's anything that was ever alive, plant or animal. So any food scraps, meats, dairy, bones, and then paper-based products, all here at the city of Napa you can put in there. And it comes to our facility, which is about a $14 million processing facility for composting. Here in the US, we make about 9 times our body weight in composting, recycling, and landfill items every single year, which is kind of crazy. And when we look at compost, we're looking at the items we were just talking about. So the items of anything that was alive, plant or animal, from your food scraps to your paper-based coffee grounds, to even your tea bags that can be composted. And what we found here in California, specifically the EPA, 30% of what we're throwing away is actually what we classify as organics, that compost, which is about 219 pounds per person every single year. And we waste about $1,600 for a family of 4 on the amount of organics or food that we throw into the trash. And so we looked at that. California has looked at this, the US has looked at it, and there's studies on how long it takes to decompose things. And one of my favorite facts is a head of lettuce. How long does a head of lettuce decompose when we send it to our composting facility? It actually only takes 60 days at our composting facility for it to decompose and then become compost. You see a big windrow is what we call them at our facility. But if we take that same head of lettuce and we throw it into the trash can, how long does it take? Up to 25 years in a landfill. 25 years to decompose, which is crazy, but it makes sense because landfills are meant to make things mummify. It's a freeze in time, if you will. And so anaerobic decomposition happens, and there's no light, there's no air, and methane gas is produced, which is 31 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And so that's why we're working here in the city of Napa to really get people to compost at home, putting it in their brown cart or the other options.
Well, I know that many cities in California have composting options through their trash cycle, and maybe they do in your area, other people's areas too. But also doing it at home can be pretty easy, even if you're in a small space. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So if you don't have curbside composting, you could do backyard composting if you have a backyard area. And that can include on the top left, you see the black container, or there's the spinning containers now from Costco I've seen. Or if you have pallets, or some place that has pallets that you can reuse, you can create the stalls, or you can just make a giant pile against the fence next to the neighbors you don't like. I've actually had citizens of Napa tell me that. But if you don't have a backyard, you live in an apartment like I do, worm composting is a pretty fun thing. And all you need is a tub. You go to Target or something and buy a tub like on the top left, some soil, chicken manure, shredded paper, water, cardboard, and then some red wigglers is what we call them. And you can start worm composting. And there's a picture of Cleopatra because she loved worms so much and respected them so much. She made them illegal to kill, or it was death. You could get death if you killed worms. So.
Well, that seems a little extreme, but you gotta love it. The worms are so fast; they really go through the produce very quickly. We found with our home worms, and here in Napa and Sonoma, there's a company that will ship you a pound of worms and get them over to you pretty darn quickly all around the country. So, Kendra, you've got some very upcycled worm boxes there. Tell us about those. Those are fantastic.
Yeah, so in the picture that you'll see, and I love the worm lady in Sonoma, that's who we use for our worm composting shops that we do here. But you can see upcycled wine boxes. So you can use any wine boxes that you have at home and make them into worm composters. Upcycling is amazing. And all you have to do is get those materials that we talked about and then start adding we say half a pound of red wigglers and a pound of food every week. And by food, it's any food scraps of vegetables. I would stay away from citrus and dairy and meats and stuff like that. But your lettuce, your banana peel, your coffee grounds, your cardboard, all those kind of items can go into your upcycled worm composter.
Well, and that worm composting, the castings and the liquid from it is really fantastic for your garden. At St. Supéry, you all know, you've been around before, and you know that we compost out at the ranch all of our stems and seeds and leaves. And it's not super attractive, but it's a lot of stuff that we've got out there composting versus the fill. But at the winery, we also compost a little bit in the garden. Bri has her small composter going for our kitchen scraps and our break room kitchen scraps, and then a little bit of our grass, and the rest of the grass and yard waste recycling actually goes back out to the ranch. So that really reduces kind of what our green items are here. Any other tips we should have for home, Kendra?
Anything that was ever alive, plant or animal. That's the biggest thing I can say for people when they're trying to figure out what goes into the compost. And remember, no plastic whatsoever. Plastic was never alive. You don't want to ingest it. And we want to keep it out of our soils because we work to have rich soils so our vineyards can grow amazing grapes and make amazing wines like St. Supéry. So.
Well, great. Thank you so much for those tips today. It's really fun, and it's a fun thing to take care of. A lot of folks have kids and they tend to really enjoy the worm composting. It really doesn't have a lot of aroma and can be done in a small space in your kitchen or your garden. It has great benefits, even if you have just small potted plants. Those small potted plants really need some extra nutrients. So let's jump back to Brooke in the cellar, because I know you're all enjoying this delicious Cabernet Franc. And Brooke, tell us a little bit about the winemaking on this wine. I love the aromatics. I love the floral notes that we get. And I think it's really just fabulous.
Yeah, so we of course we've talked about this before, but we start with hand picking the red grapes at night, so that it's cold and it preserves all the fruit flavors. And then we also select every single berry that goes into our red wines using hand sorting line or an optical sorter. And then once we get everything sorted, we have, like I said, we have those 3 clones of Cabernet Franc, and we'll actually pick those clones separately, and we will ferment them in these tanks, these small tanks that are in the room that I'm in here. So in these open top tanks, and we usually can fit a clone in each of them with the amount of fruit we get. And we try to keep them together in the cellar so we can taste them as they're fermenting together, but sometimes harvest doesn't allow that, so we jump around to taste them. But you know, when reds ferment, we need the skins, because I don't know if everyone knows, but a red grape has clear juice. So the only way that we're going to get this deep color in this wine is by using that skin to get the color out. So what we do is we ferment with the skins, and when the ferment starts to happen on reds, the skins will separate from the liquid in the bottom of the tank, and it will create kind of a cap at the top of it. And we need to take the liquid from the bottom and put it over the top of those skins. And we do that, and we use the temperature of the ferment, which can get quite hot, and we want it to get hot. So we can use that heat to extract out all of that color and all of that flavor and structure from those skins. So we do this regularly while they're fermenting, about every 3 hours, and the ferment is quite fast. But with these open top tanks, we also have another way that we can extract, and it's called a punch down, where we can take a pneumatic foot and push that cap down into the liquid. And that's just a little bit gentler, maybe doesn't extract as much tannins out, but it's going to break up that cap. And then the next time we do a pump over, there'll be some new channels that the wine can run over. So that's kind of a benefit of being able to ferment in these tanks, because we can do some different extraction techniques. And the other cool thing about this wine is 36% of it was fermented in barrels. And that is quite a labor intensive process, where we take a brand new French oak barrel, and we will put the sorted berries inside that barrel and ferment in that barrel. So we took a video of Juan Vega, our barrel master, and he went to a cooper and learned how to take apart a barrel. And he takes it apart halfway, basically. And these stainless steel hoops on the barrels are actually holding the staves together. So there's no glue involved in barrels. It's just these tight hoops and the pressure of the hoops that are doing that. So once he gets that hoop off, you can see those staves are loosening up there. And then the head of the barrel is just gonna fall down. And then what we can do is we will take the head off, and we'll put 400 berries inside the barrel.
Pounds.
And then pounds, sorry, yeah, 400, much more than 400 berries, 400 pounds of grapes. And I call them berries, but they're grapes. They look like blueberries, but he'll put that head back on, he'll slide these hoops back on, and then we'll put the barrel onto a barrel rack. The barrel rack has rollers, if you can see that. And because I can't pump the barrel over or punch it down, but I still need to extract out all that color from the skins, we will actually go through and roll the barrel. And we'll have to do that. We do that every 4 hours during ferment. And you can imagine we can do up to 100 barrels this way. So it's pretty labor intensive rolling all those barrels by hand. If anybody needs a job during harvest and a good workout, I can help you with that. A barrel fermentation ferment is going to be a lot slower than a tank ferment, because you can see the size difference. That tank is going to get a lot hotter while it's fermenting than the barrel. So the barrel goes a lot slower. Whereas a tank would take about 7 to 10 days to finish ferment, the barrels could take up to 6 weeks to finish fermenting. So it's a long process, but what happens is by fermenting in that barrel, in that brand new barrel, you get this incredible oak integration, and it gives a little bit of a different layer of wine, a different component of wine. And so if we take the same block picked on the same day and we ferment it in a stainless steel tank and a little bit in that barrel, all of a sudden we have two different wines. And we're trying to make the most balanced wine that we can with a lot of layers and complexity, but we want it to be balanced as well.
So Brooke, you know, we talk about the different fermentations and the different clones. We don't bottle the clones separately, but tell us a little bit about what flavor profile those Cabernet Franc clones bring to the blend.
Yeah, so there's actually all three clones are used in this blend. But we don't use all three clones, if that makes sense. Each of these tanks produced about 13 to 17 barrels, depending on what they started at. But we just chose the specific barrels that we wanted for this blend. So we have clone 214, which is really round, and it kind of shows a centered wine. It's complete. We have clone 623, which shows a little bit of redder fruit and in really bright opulent fruit. And then we have clone 327, which shows more darker fruit and brooding. So we used all three of those to make this blend. And then 11% of the blend is from that Rutherford 31 block. And we use that Merlot. You know, Cabernet Franc can be a little bit savory and herbal in the notes. It's not a huge fruit driven wine. There's more of these savory characteristics and herbal notes, spices. And so we can use that Merlot to bring in a little bit of fruit and to also plump up the center palate a little bit. And it's a really good blender into Cabernet Franc.
Yeah, great descriptors there, Brooke. Do you notice a strong variance in the aromatics between those clones, or pretty consistent?
I mean, like the redder fruit one, Cabernet Franc is a little bit hard because it likes to be green flavors, bell peppery, and like I said, herbal notes. You can get herbal, like herbs, I guess. Yes, herbal. And so what we do is we push the ripeness a little bit to get darker fruit. So we can use that clone 327 to get some dark fruit flavors, but I also get like the black licorice, the black pepper from that clone. And then I can use the 623 to add a little bit of the red notes, like rhubarb is a lot of times what I can get on our Cabernet Franc. And then the 214 for more of mouthfeel and things. So the aromatics are different and the flavor profile are different as well on those three clones.
Interesting. I always love a little bit of that floral note that I get from the Cabernet Franc. April has a question for you on, do you put whole or crushed grapes into the barrels?
They're actually whole. Yeah, so they go from the sorting line, and they look like berries. They look like blueberries. So they're pretty much uncrushed. I mean, if they're in, maybe the bottom of them get crushed a little bit, but they're pretty whole. But as it ferments, those berries break up. And as we're doing the pump overs or in the barrels, the spins, they do break up a little bit. And then, you know, we're just trying to extract everything we can out of those skins.
Yeah, that's it. They sort of get gently crushed as we're going through. Well, the wine is delicious. You certainly achieved a great sense of balance and ripeness. 2017 was a very warm vintage for us in Napa Valley, and really quite a delicious wine. And I'm going to just jump over as we sip on this. Let's pop over to see Bri Hoover, our state horticulturalist, and see what she's growing and has plans for you coming up. Hi, Bri.
Oh. Hi. So I kind of wanted to talk about microgreens, since it's, you know, cold pretty much everywhere. And yeah, you can have a garden in the winter, but sometimes it's nice to, you know, feel like you have a little bit of spring, you know, in your home. So I love microgreens because, like I said, you can grow them in your home. They're gorgeous. They add a really beautiful colors to any of your dishes. They taste great and they're super nutritious. So I think it's a great way to do a little bit of winter gardening indoors.
I do. I love that pop of flavor that they give, like the cilantro microgreens. They just give this burst of springtime to me. You know, just sprinkling a little cilantro microgreens on top of a beautiful piece of sustainable seafood. Just fantastic. I love that burst of flavor. And you said that they're more nutritious. Bring it on. It's January. We're all thinking about our health.
Yeah, that's right. So like I was saying, so microgreens are basically just like brand new baby plants, you know, so you can grow things like lettuces, anything in the cabbage family, all kinds of herbs, edible flowers, grasses, spinach, pretty much anything. And so when those first leaves pop up, they're called cotyledons. They're just full of nutrients and enzymes, and they have way more than the mature leaf. So they can have anywhere from like 4 to 40 times, depending on the plant, depending on the nutrient. So just a little bit will go a long way in your food.
Well, so where can I saw some great little containers that you had there. Can you tell me a little about where I can grow them in the house and with what sort of vessels?
Yeah, so as far as vessels go, I mean, if you have standard, you know, seed trays, that will work. I mean, you can get creative. You don't need anything fancy, but you can use, you know, bowls, pie dishes, old cake pans, you know, take out, you know, containers from food, things like that. I mean, anything that's, you know, 2 to 4 inches deep. You don't need holes, like I said. And then if you have a nice sunny spot in your home or a south facing window or even an indoor grow light, just anywhere in your home, a lot of times it's a kitchen that might get a lot of light, you can grow microgreens. It's really easy.
And obviously it must take a lot more seeds. So, I mean, by sort of like, I don't know, square inch by size, how much more are we using than our sort of standard pack of seeds?
Yeah, so I mean, it might be kind of hard to visualize, but you know, if you have like a standard seed tray or even maybe like a 9 by 13, you know, pan that you want to use from your kitchen, you might use 1 to 2 ounces. So it's a little more than a packet. So I do like to buy those seeds in bulk. You don't need any kind of special seeds for this since you are just growing regular plants. You're just doing it a little different. So I recommend doing it in bulk. That way you have enough to last you a while.
And about how long are they going to take to come up to be edible from, you know, your starting point?
Yeah, so once you plant them, anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the plant and kind of how warm. The warmer it is, the faster you'll see germination. So once you plant that seed, you're, you know, misting it every, you know, several times a day. You'll see, you know, you'll see the first leaves kind of coming out, and then you'll kind of know they'll be ready soon.
Okay, so if we're buying those bulk seeds, we might have to get 3 different kinds with our neighbors that we're sharing our worms with, and everybody can do a different big tray. 3, so we all have different flavors coming through. Maybe the only way we're seeing anybody these days is passing the tray at the door, at least here in California where we're shut down again. Thank you, Bri, for those tips. That's really helpful. And let's hear from Chef Tod what your favorite microgreens are and what you like to do with them.
Well, microgreens are a lot of fun. They became very popular a few years back. A lot of chefs were using them as beautiful garnishes. That's one of the things that I really like to do when you find that a dish or a little hors d'oeuvre or canapé needs a little extra pop or something like that. That really ties in with the main flavor you're trying to get across. You can get a micro sprout or microgreen of that herb or that particular vegetable and add that into the dish just by using it simply as a garnish. So in most cases, I like to keep it really simple and plain and just add it right on top as a finishing little touch because it really does add that extra pop of flavor. It's got that beautiful kind of loose frilly look to it, as well as the color and the different shapes of those tiny little leaves. So that's one of the best ways that I like to use it. I do tend to stay away from trying to serve too much of it as a small salad because it is pretty intense in flavor and it's not really textural like a baby lettuce might be. If you were to let them grow longer, they would definitely get to that kind of teenage size where you could use them in a different way. And I also would stay away maybe from some brothy things that would just melt right away and you'd lose the texture and the effect of it all. So I tend to use them more or less as a real nice kind of a finishing garnish.
Well, you have a really exciting dish for us tonight, the sausage strata. So, you know, let's see what you've got cooking for us.
Welcome into the kitchen. I love this wine. It's a fun one to work with. It really has that unusual or really different aromatics that you pick up in it. And, you know, Brooke mentioned bell peppers and spice and all those other kind of characteristics that are in there that are really interesting. And so I always tend to think kind of bigger flavors to go with this one, being that it is our warm winter nights. Obviously, I'm thinking of something that maybe is easy for you to put together. Maybe you're more apt to try out this recipe if you have some of the ingredients, or you can shop for them pretty easily. But it's one of those things that's really comforting. This particular dish being a strata, which is essentially almost like a savory bread pudding, is something that you can plan ahead on. You could marinate it or have it soaking earlier in the day or even the night before, and then bake it off. Even if you wanted to do it for a nice brunch, pop open a bottle of our wine and have this with brunch. Or if you're doing a nice warm dinner on a cold night in the winter here, maybe you got the fireplace going, and you can put together this kind of a hearty, kind of a warming comfort type of a dish. And so what it is essentially using up some of your old bread. If you happen to have gotten the sourdough bug during this time, during shelter in place and throughout this past year, if you picked up that idea of making your own sourdough bread, or even if you just happen to have an extra loaf of bread that's maybe a day old or two, go ahead and cube it up. You want that to dry out, very much like if you were to make bread pudding, or if you were to make stuffing for the holiday season, you know, stuffing or dressing. It's kind of that same idea. Now I've been making, playing with our own sourdough. So with our own grape starter from our property, I started our own starter. So I've been making some sourdough and utilizing that in all different dishes, as well as coming up with ways to use the sourdough discard, right? Because if you are into this, you know that you have to pour some of it out into discard, and it's kind of a shame to lose that. So there are different ways that you can utilize your discard as well. But I had some leftover bread, and so what I did was I went ahead and cubed it all up ahead of time. This is a couple cups worth right here, about 4 cups actually, and it's been drying so that it can absorb all the flavors of everything else. We happen to have from our Dollarhide estate some chickens who are very happy to the point where they're laying eggs for us all the time. And these Dollarhide eggs will be part of the binder that will go into my strata mixture. So with about 4 of our Dollarhide eggs here, they're getting bigger. Happy hens up there. I also have some milk as part of the recipe. So this is going to be a couple cups worth. And essentially what you're making here, when you think about it, is a custard. Right? So that's about 2 cups worth of milk. And then we also have some spices and seasonings that can go into this. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit of salt. You want to have the custard base of it seasoned pretty well. Let's put some black pepper in there. And this can be to taste if you want it extra assertive. I think that the wine has plenty of characteristic going on in there that you can stand up with a good amount of spice. And speaking of spice, here's a couple ingredients that have a lot of flavor here. So this is a smoked paprika. This is basically pimenton. And this pimenton is not the picante, but it's dolce. So it's a sweet Spanish paprika that has a smokiness to it. Wonderful dried chili characteristic, as well as some Dijon mustard for a little extra punch. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in right into the custard mix. That's going to add a lot of flavor to that custard base.
Is that like a Coleman's mustard, Todd?
That was actually Dijon mustard.
Okay.
Yeah, so French Dijon mustard. And then what I want to do is break up those yolks, turn this into our custard mixture. Now, when I think about the Cabernet Franc and some of the vegetable profiles and things that you pick up, I think of herbs, a lot of fresh herbs in there. So I happen to have some parsley from our garden, as well as some sage. And then I also have some vegetables from our garden as well. So some wonderful red onions. I think peppers and onions with sausage. So imagine that kind of a smothered sandwich type of a thing that you put with bread. So that's where this kind of motivation came from. So once everything is all whisked up pretty well here, I've got the mustard infused in with this. The eggs are mixed in with the milk. Then you can go right ahead and add in your chopped parsley as well as your sage. You can put any herbs in here. Now I'm using a sausage in this case that is on the sweeter side, less spicy. Sometimes a little bit too much of capsaicin heat and spice will clash with the red wine. Now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and pour this right over and let it soak and absorb into our sourdough bread. Now the process on this will take a little bit of time to plan ahead so that you can allow it to soak and absorb. It's pretty important to allow it to do that. It's going to take anywhere from maybe 4 hours at the minimum. And that's why I was saying, even if you can plan ahead a little bit and you're planning on doing this later on, maybe prep this up and have it soaking. You can put it into the refrigerator and have it all ready to go. So very much like doing a bread pudding or a holiday stuffing dressing. You want it to be absorbed. It's funny how we use old dried bread that we want dried on purpose, and then we soak it so that it's very soft, but that's the idea. It's going to absorb nicely. It'll hold its shape. It won't break down. So you get these wonderful kind of cube bites of sourdough. Plenty of flavor going on in here between the herbs and the spices that we have, salt and black pepper. And so basically you just let this sit. Now, in the meantime, what I did was I also cooked up some vegetables ahead. So here are my bell peppers. I've got green and red, and these are both sweet. So I didn't want to do any spicy chilies in this case. I also happen to find some beautiful Swiss chard in the garden that I decided to saute and put in there as well. So I did a really quick kind of a saute on these just for like a minute to soften them slightly, get away from that raw flavor. And I can actually mix this in with it as well. I use a little bit of olive oil. You can put garlic in there or use a garlic infused oil, extra virgin olive oil. So you get some great flavor, because this is all really going to meld in all together and add flavor. I really like the way that that's all going to pair well with the Cabernet Franc. So once we let this sit, you could I'm going to go ahead and put our sausage in here. This is garlic and herbs, Italian style sausage. Again, not too spicy. And you can use any of your favorite sausage that you have. It could even be a chicken-based one, turkey, if you're not into pork. If you want to try different flavored ones that are either raw, as this one was, that I baked off in the oven ahead of time, or you can also keep it really convenient and safe by having the pre-cooked sausage that you just cut into small bites. So there's a lot of distribution of bites in here into this mix. Go ahead and let that sit in there. All the flavors will come together. If you need to, you can take plastic wrap and put it over the top, maybe even an extra plate or weight on there to push it down to make sure that it's pretty well submerged, so that during that 4-hour time of marinating and all the flavors getting all to know each other in there, getting very friendly, then go ahead and put a plate on there and just put it in the refrigerator for a few hours or so there. All right.
So Todd, what's the longest you can leave it soaking?
I think overnight is about as long as you want to go. If you were to go to like 24 hours, any longer than that, it's probably going to mush it out a little bit too much. And so really all you want to do is kind of get everything hydrated through. So if you were to do this before you go to sleep, and then you're ready to bake it off first thing in the morning for your brunch. Likewise, if you do it in the morning, you're ready to bake it off early afternoon for early evening for your dinner. Gives you time to start the fire, pop open the bottle of wine.
And if you only have fresh bread, would you want to toast that, or how do you get it stale enough quickly?
So if you do have a fresh bread that's very moist, then what you can do is go ahead and cube it all up and then spread it out onto a baking pan, and over a really low temperature in your oven, just let it dry in there, maybe 200 degrees, 225. So not necessarily getting hard, crispy, crunchy by browning it and roasting it or baking it, but basically just drying it out over a low temperature. So it may take maybe an hour or so to kind of dry it up. It might even be an hour to 2 hours just to get it to dry so that it's almost on the stale side there. Now, so you can imagine that this has, for sake of fast forwarding, I'm going to put this in a small little cast iron pan, which is great as far as a presentation, but it also is a great baking vessel. If I put just a tiny bit of extra virgin olive oil in there, a little lubrication, it's always a good thing.
Always good to have a little more olive oil or butter.
Delicious. We'll put that in there. So let's imagine that this has soaked long enough now. So really what I'm going to do is just pile this all in. Now, if it doesn't soak long enough, what you find is the texture is going to be hard and kind of crunchy. And so that's not anything we're looking for here. We want to make sure that it has definitely had this time to soak. But in order to kind of speed things along and show you what it will look like, you can put all this in. First of all, I would recommend getting all the breading in and kind of situated. You can arrange the decoration on it too, because you will be able to see a lot of the vegetables and the sausage and the chard or the kale, whatever you end up putting in. You will be able to see that. And you want ultimately the amount of the custard to come up just to the level so that as it cooks, it will kind of souffle just a little bit. It will rise up from the eggs that are in there. And then it'll settle down as it sets. So when this is ready to go into the oven, after you've had it well soaked, you want to cover it with foil initially and go into your 350-degree oven for about 25 minutes. And what that's going to do is start to set the eggs so that they can cook through. It'll hold the whole texture of it together without over browning before it has a chance to cook all the way through on the inside, because you want to make sure that those eggs cook through. And then after that first 25 minutes or so, go ahead and take off, and you can see that the amount of the custard here is actually right up to the top, which is great. I'm mounding it up just a little bit there, and that'll be nice and brown and crispy. And so after that 25 minutes, you can remove that. And then you can go ahead and put on some manchego cheese. And the manchego is a sheep's milk based cheese from Spain. This is very popular. It's got a nice sharpness to it. It adds a little bit of that sheep's milk kind of tang to it. You can add that cheese right over the top and finish it for like another 15 to 20 minutes after that initial cooking, where you put foil over it and finish it. So this will help to cook it through into your hot oven at 350. Go ahead and set your timer on that. When it's all ready and all set to come out, you know how Zoom works with our Zoom ovens that we have.
I know. I need a Zoom oven at home that makes dinner like that.
Et voila.
Ah, et voila.
And it actually even grew in my Zoom oven. That's really magic. So it's even a bigger pan here. But you can see that beautiful golden kind of crust to it. It's thick, it's tall. Same idea here. I put the cheese on, so I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's this little webbing of the cheese, that manchego cheese that I put on there. So now you have that all good.
Ah, looking gorgeous, Todd.
I would definitely recommend letting this set for a while. You don't want to scoop into it right away. It's kind of like lasagna, where you want the starches and everything to kind of cool and settle so that it'll hold. But you can essentially kind of score around the outside of your pan. And if you don't use cast iron, by all means, you can use another dish. You can use a baking dish, a casserole, something like that. You can make these as large or as small as you'd like. And then just go ahead and cut through. Give yourself a nice healthy portion.
That looks amazing. It just needs a pretty green salad next to it.
Exactly. That would be fantastic. And so now that you have this set, you can kind of scoop it out a la pie wedge, or almost like a quiche kind of a thing. Beautiful dish, full of flavor.
That's
Show you what this looks
lovely.
like to the side there, if you can see that. But here's a great example of it. You can also put just a little bit more fresh manchego over the top if you'd like. Don't hesitate.
Okay, a little more cheese. What about for our vegetarians? What are we gonna do?
So vegetarians, very easy. As long as you're okay with eggs and milk and dairy, a little extra virgin olive oil. You can just leave the sausage out and just bump it up with maybe more of your favorite vegetables. Mushrooms would be fantastic in here because of the earthiness and everything. The herbs also play into it. You can stay with that same manchego cheese if you like. It should still go well with the wine. So you can eliminate the red meat, the sausage out of there. It is a tough one to create the custard kind of texture if you are trying to stay away from dairy as well. So being vegan would be much more of a challenge for this type of a preparation, but it's got this fantastic thickness to it. You can see the side there. It's got that wonderful moisture. Another nice thing is that you could use a little lighter if you wanted to pair this with like a white wine. Here's a little bit of a dusting of that smoked paprika just over the top there. You could always swap out the sausage, maybe go with a lighter cheese. You could do maybe a cheddar or something like that. Maybe leave the sausage out, and you could also pair this with one of our white wines, possibly something very rich like our Virtue, which would be fantastic. So depending on what kind of wine you're opening up. Also, if you do really like spicy, if you wanted to use the spicy pimenton or actually add hot spicy peppers as well as sausage in there, everyone loves that. Then maybe even go to our Moscato wine. That might be a wonderful way because of that residual sugar and that lower alcohol in there. It might be a really great match to go with a spicy version of this if you so choose to. So I hope you give this a try.
Yeah, the spicy breakfast version with Moscato. That sounds pretty fabulous too.
That would be great. That would be great. Yes.
Absolutely delicious. Well, you've outdone yourself again, Todd. You do not get to win in the photo enjoy competition because you work for us. But I think with that photo and how delicious that looks, you'd be in the running to win for sure. But don't forget to post your photos of what delicious things you make tonight, or a beautiful day outside in the snow, rain, sun, whatever you've got. If you're outdoors and having fun, or just having a good time with your shelter in place pod, or making something delicious or making someone happy, do share that on our enjoy and our competition, because you could win some great things. So we do look forward to seeing you all again next week. Fantastic tips from Chef Tod. Be sure to check out his bonus tracks on YouTube. I'm always learning something new, and we look forward to seeing you next week, or, give us a call. We'll join you anytime. So thanks so much, everybody. And until next week, be well, be kind, and enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers.
Everyone.